The exile to Glaber. In the distant future, humanity faced a betrayal so deep it seemed impossible to overcome. The elites, fearing the rise of the common people, decided to cast away those they deemed unworthy. Exiled to a desolate planet, Glaber, humans were abandoned, left to face a world where every breath felt like a struggle and survival was a distant hope. Glaber, a death world, was nothing like the Earth humans once knew. Violent storms raged, treacherous terrain twisted the ground beneath their feet, and resources were so scarce that even the most basic needs became impossible to satisfy. The exiles, with no choice but to adapt or perish, struggled to find hope. They quickly realized that they would need to band together, each person contributing what little they had left. It was clear, only through unity could they survive. But survival was not enough. The determined few, led by Captain Erwin Kessler, refused to accept a life of mere existence. They believed they could not only survive but thrive in this hostile environment. There was something on Glaber, they sensed it, something that could change everything. A glimmer of hope. The exile's survival was uncertain from the start. After being cast aside by their own kind, the people of Glaber, now stranded on this godforsaken planet, couldn't help but feel the weight of their abandonment. Glaber was not just a world of danger, it was a world that seemed to hate life itself. The brutal winds, the toxic storms, and the bizarre wildlife made every attempt to create shelter seem like a futile effort. Resources were nearly non-existent. It was a place designed for death. But as the days bled into weeks and weeks into months, something within the exiles shifted. Those who once feared their inevitable demise began to change. There was no more time for sorrow, only survival mattered now. With this new resolve, they started forming small, tightly knit groups, each specializing in something crucial for the community's survival. Some searched for food, others scouted for resources, while a few focused on finding shelter or constructing rudimentary technologies from whatever was at hand. Kessler, once just a man in the crowd, had taken charge as a natural leader. His mind, sharp as ever, soon turned to something far more significant than mere survival. He had spent countless nights under the toxic skies, staring at the stars above, wondering if anyone had ever been cast away like they had. He refused to accept that their exile was a death sentence. Something about this planet, despite its hostility, seemed to beckon them, as though there was an unknown force at work, waiting to be discovered. Then came the discovery. It was a low-ranking engineer named Lyra, a quiet woman who had always worked on the fringes of the group, who first noticed something strange in the cliffs near the settlement. She had been searching for usable materials to build a more stable shelter when she found the strange rock formations buried in the ground. They shimmered in the dim light of the toxic sky, a faint glow pulsating through their jagged edges. Curious, she gathered a team of explorers to investigate further. The moment they touched the mineral, they felt something, the air grew charged, their senses heightened, and their minds buzzed with a new clarity. This was no ordinary mineral. When Kessler heard the news, he gathered his best engineers and scientists to examine it. After several trials and experiments, they discovered that the mineral was not just a power source, it was an enhancer. In its purest form, it could increase human strength, sharpen the mind, and extend endurance beyond what was thought possible. More than that, it appeared to have unique properties that allowed humans to adapt to Glaber's harsh atmosphere. This mineral could literally make them stronger than they had ever been. It was, without question, the breakthrough they had all been waiting for. The more they mined, the more they realized that this substance was everywhere, underground, beneath the surface of Glaber, like veins of gold waiting to be tapped. The land had hidden its greatest treasure deep within, and it was now within their reach. It was as if the planet itself had been designed to resist, to push back, but only for those daring enough to see through its illusions. The exiles' new abilities were immediate. The first time Kessler himself tried a sample, he felt the difference instantly. He could run faster, his muscles felt stronger, his senses sharper. The others felt it too, an overwhelming sense of clarity in their minds and the physical power to match. But it wasn't just about brute strength, it was about intellect and adaptation. The more they used the mineral, the quicker they learned how to manipulate the environment around them, building stronger structures, better weapons, and even rudimentary machines to assist in their efforts. The discovery of the mineral breathed new life into the community. It was as though a new dawn had broken over their existence on Glaber. Hope surged like wildfire through the ranks. No longer were they just surviving, they were evolving, becoming something different, something powerful. The energy in the air shifted, and the exiles now saw Glaber in an entirely new light. They began to feel an innate connection to the world around them, something primal and raw. They were no longer victims, they were conquerors of their fate. However, this power did not come without challenges. The mineral's effects were not without side effects. While it enhanced strength and intelligence, it also came with a certain unpredictability. Prolonged exposure seemed to cause strange alterations in perception, sometimes making the user more attuned to the planet's environment, too attuned. Some began to report hearing whispers in the winds, as though the very planet was speaking to them, guiding them. Others suffered from wild hallucinations, their minds unable to process the onslaught of new information flooding them. Kessler, ever the pragmatist, ordered that the use of the mineral be monitored closely. But despite the occasional drawback, the benefits were undeniable. Glaber had given them a gift that was now transforming the exiles into something far more dangerous to their enemies. They began to train, harnessing their new abilities to their full potential. No longer did they merely fight for survival, now, they fought to thrive, to seize control of their own fate. It was the first true victory they had experienced in their exile. News of their newfound power quickly spread across the settlement, fueling their resolve. The leaders of the community, Kessler, Lyra, and others, began to form plans. They would need to create defenses, a structured society that could wield their new power without succumbing to the chaos that had ruled them before. The sense of unity grew stronger. They began to divide responsibilities, build new tools, and expand their influence on the planet, knowing that this newfound strength could be both a blessing and a curse. The exiles, once abandoned and betrayed, now stood on the precipice of something greater than any of them could have dreamed. But there was still so much more to discover. Who else had knowledge of this mineral? Could they trust what they had uncovered? And, most importantly, what would they do with their new power? These questions loomed over the community as they began to expand their efforts, working toward a future where their greatest threat would no longer be the planet itself, but the powerful forces that might seek to exploit them. As the dust settled and the first hints of a new society began to form, the exiles had only one certainty: their journey was just beginning. The mineral had unlocked a new chapter in their survival, but the true test was yet to come. They could no longer ignore the larger universe beyond Glaber. Their exile had shaped them into something formidable, and it was only a matter of time before the galaxy took notice. With this glimmer of hope shining brighter than ever before, they were ready for whatever came next, rising forces. In the months that followed their discovery of the mineral, the exiles on Glaber began to undergo an extraordinary transformation. What was once a small, fractured group of survivors now stood on the cusp of something far more significant, a force to be reckoned with. The powers granted by the mineral had not only enhanced their physical and mental abilities but had begun to fundamentally alter the way they interacted with their environment and each other. Their survival instincts, once driven by desperation, were now guided by a vision of prosperity and power. Kessler stood at the heart of this revolution. His once humble background as a leader had now expanded to something more profound. The decisions he made could no longer be based solely on survival, they had to consider the long-term future of their people. No longer could they afford to simply endure, they had to thrive. As the exiles grew stronger, so too did their ambitions. The plans Kessler had long mulled over in the quiet moments of his leadership were now becoming clear. He gathered a council of trusted allies: Lyra, the brilliant engineer who had discovered the mineral, and several others who had risen to prominence due to their newfound abilities. Together, they began to lay the foundation for a new society. They mapped out the territories they had secured and began fortifying them, using their enhanced physical strength and intelligence to create structures that were nearly indestructible. The mineral allowed them to harness the planet's resources in ways that were previously unimaginable, turning the very environment they had once feared into an ally. But it was not just about infrastructure. Kessler understood that to build a lasting society, they needed to establish a strong sense of unity. The exiles had been divided by their past. Betrayal, loss, and fear had created rifts that were not easily mended. But now, with the promise of strength and power, those divisions began to close. As they trained together, fighting for a common purpose, the exiles forged bonds stronger than any they had ever known. They were no longer just survivors, they were a force united by a common goal, to thrive on Glaber, and eventually, to expand beyond it. With their enhanced abilities, the exiles began to explore the planet more fully, mapping out previously unreachable regions. Glaber's surface, once hostile and treacherous, now seemed full of untapped potential. The storms, while still fierce, no longer held the same terror. The exiles learned to read the winds and adapt their movements, building shelters that could withstand even the most violent tempests. The toxic air, which had once seemed impossible to breathe, was now more manageable. Using their newfound intelligence, they developed ways to filter the toxins and convert the planet's resources into breathable air. As their influence over Glaber grew, so too did their understanding of the planet's mysterious origins. The exiles discovered ancient ruins scattered across the landscape, structures built long before their arrival, with symbols and carvings that suggested the planet had once been inhabited by another, unknown civilization. These ruins piqued Kessler's curiosity. What had happened to this lost race? Why had they left? Or had they been wiped out? The more they uncovered, the more Kessler became convinced that the key to Glaber's true nature, and possibly their salvation, lay in these ruins. But the mysteries of Glaber were not the only forces at play. As the exiles began to grow in strength and confidence, they attracted attention from beyond their new home. One evening, as the sun set behind the jagged cliffs, the first sign of external interest appeared. A strange signal, faint but unmistakable, was detected in the exiles' newly established communication systems. It wasn't a natural occurrence, someone, or something, had deliberately sent the signal. Kessler, ever cautious, ordered the signal be traced. The source was not on Glaber. It came from beyond the planet's atmosphere, from a ship in orbit. This revelation struck a chord of both fear and excitement within the community. Who could have sent the signal? Were they friend or foe? And what did they want with the exiles? Kessler knew that the moment of truth was approaching. Glaber's isolation had come to an end. He gathered his council once more, discussing their next steps. Their power was growing, but so were the risks. They could no longer remain in the shadows of the galaxy. The world they had built could attract all kinds of attention, both good and bad. But even as uncertainty loomed, the exiles were no longer afraid. They had something they hadn't had before: control. They controlled their fate, their strength, and now, with their new understanding of Glaber's secrets, they controlled their future. The decision was made. Kessler ordered the exiles to prepare for an encounter. The mineral had given them the means to stand their ground, both on Glaber and, potentially, in the greater galaxy. They would not allow themselves to be victims again. If the visitors from the ship in orbit sought to challenge them, they would meet them head-on, with the strength of their new powers. If they came in peace, then the exiles would embrace the opportunity for cooperation and growth. The entire settlement mobilized. The exiles, now united, gathered at the base of the cliffs, their eyes turned toward the sky. They stood as a force of nature, once weak and vulnerable, now strong and resolute. Their confidence was unmistakable. They had not only survived Glaber's deadly environment, they had conquered it, shaping it to their will. Now, they would see if the galaxy beyond would accept them as they were, beings of power, resilience, and unyielding determination. As the first signs of the approaching ship flickered across their radar screens, the exiles held their breath. The encounter was imminent. Whatever happened next would define them. Would they be seen as a threat or an ally? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, the exiles were no longer just a group of abandoned survivors. They had become a force, one that would shape the future of Glaber, and perhaps, the entire galaxy. A test of resolve. The day the ship arrived in orbit over Glaber was a turning point. For the exiles, it was a moment that could make or break everything they had fought for. Kessler stood atop a newly constructed tower, scanning the sky with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. The ship had been detected days ago, but its true intentions remained unclear. What had once been a world isolated from the rest of the galaxy was now under threat, both from the unknown forces in the sky and from the complexity of their own growing power. The exiles had spent months preparing, harnessing the full potential of the mineral. They had become stronger, more intelligent, and more adaptable to their harsh surroundings. Yet, Kessler knew that despite all their new abilities, this would be their true test. The galaxy, for all its mystery, was a place of conflict and danger, and the exiles were about to find out whether they were ready to face it. "We can't afford to make the wrong move," Kessler said, his voice resolute, but there was a trace of hesitation. It was rare for him to doubt, but this was uncharted territory. They had transformed from a group of lost souls to a powerful, unified force, but the challenges of the outside world were still unknown. Would they be seen as a threat by the ship's occupants? Or worse, would their newly discovered strength cause them to be hunted? The council gathered in the command center. Lyra, who had proven herself a genius in the development of new technologies, Rook, the former military strategist who now served as the head of their defense force, and a few others who had earned the trust of Kessler. They all understood the gravity of the situation. The once quiet planet of Glaber was about to become the focal point of something much larger. Rook had been the first to suggest they prepare for the worst. "We need to assume the worst-case scenario," he said, his eyes sharp and calculating. "There's no telling who or what is aboard that ship. It could be a scout ship from an empire we know nothing about, or worse, a hostile force ready to destroy us." But Lyra was more optimistic. "We've come this far by adapting and learning. Maybe this is an opportunity. If they came in peace, we could learn from them, possibly forge an alliance. The mineral we found gives us an edge, but there's so much more we don't know." The two perspectives echoed the internal conflict that had been brewing among the exiles for weeks. They had to decide how to face the unknown, whether they would approach the newcomers as potential allies or as enemies. The stakes could not have been higher. If they approached with aggression, they risked everything they had worked for. If they chose diplomacy, they risked appearing weak, vulnerable. The balance was delicate. Kessler stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the council. "We don't know who's up there, and we don't know what they want. But we do know this. Our people have suffered long enough. We will not go back to being the powerless exiles we once were. We will show them who we've become. But we will do it with strength, intelligence, and diplomacy. We don't strike first unless we have no choice. Let's see what they want before we decide how to respond." With that, the decision was made. The exiles would send a signal in return, a peaceful greeting, with the offer of communication. They would not initiate a fight. But they would stand ready, should the situation turn hostile. Rook's defenses were prepared, and the exiles had grown proficient in using their enhanced physical abilities for both offense and defense. The power of the mineral was now integrated into their daily lives, giving them the strength to protect themselves if the worst came to pass. As the hours passed and the ship remained in orbit, tension grew. The skies above Glaber were overcast with the constant storms, but there was something different about this storm, something more charged. The air crackled with energy, as if the planet itself was aware of the impending confrontation. The exiles stood together in silence, waiting for the next move, the next signal, the next step in their journey. When the response came, it was sudden. The ship emitted a loud pulse, followed by a series of beeps that reverberated through the exiles' communication systems. It wasn't a voice, but a pattern, a message embedded in the signal. Lyra and her team worked quickly to decode it, their minds racing through the possible meanings. When the message finally became clear, Kessler felt a wave of relief mixed with wariness. It was an invitation to communicate, a gesture of peace. "We've been monitoring your progress," the message began. "You have shown remarkable resilience and adaptability. These are traits we value. We come to learn. But we also come with a warning: you are not alone. There are forces that may not view your rise with such favor. The galaxy is vast, and many eyes are upon you now." Kessler's heart raced as he processed the words. The invitation was clear: they could negotiate, learn, and possibly ally with these newcomers. But the warning was equally ominous. There were others out there, and not all of them would be as receptive. The exile survival on Glaber had been a story of strength against overwhelming odds, but now it seemed that story was expanding. They were no longer just fighting the storms of Glaber, they were about to enter a galaxy filled with unknowns. "We need to prepare," Kessler said firmly, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "This is not just a diplomatic mission. They have warned us that others are watching. We need to ensure that we are ready, both to negotiate and to defend ourselves if necessary." The council agreed, and over the next several hours, the exiles doubled down on their preparations. They strengthened their defenses, ensuring that every man, woman, and child was capable of defending their home. Training intensifies, and their enhanced abilities were put to the test. The forces they were about to face, whether in diplomacy or war, were unknown, but the exiles knew one thing: they were not the same people who had crash-landed on Glaber months ago. They were stronger, smarter, and more resilient than ever before. As the message from the ship's occupants reached its conclusion, Kessler knew that a new chapter was about to unfold. The exiles' time of isolation was over. They had become more than survivors, they had become something greater, something that could no longer be ignored. And as they awaited the next step, the thought echoed through Kessler's mind: the galaxy was watching, and the exiles were ready to show it their power. The encounter. The tension that had gripped the exiles for days reached its peak as the first true interaction with the ship above Glaber began to unfold. Kessler stood before the gathering of his people, a force of united strength and resolve. The signals they had exchanged with the ship had been filled with uncertainty, but now the time had come for action. The visitors from the sky had shown themselves to be willing to communicate, but there was no telling what lay beyond their words. The stakes were higher than ever. The exiles had fortified their settlement, their defenses now a testament to their newfound power. Their enhanced strength and intelligence had allowed them to adapt to the hostile environment of Glaber, but this new challenge was different. They were no longer just fighting the violent storms and treacherous terrain, they were facing the unknown, the vastness of the galaxy, and the possibility of allies or enemies on a scale they had never imagined. Kessler stood in front of the gathered crowd, his face set with determination. Lyra, Rook, and the other key figures of the Exile Council stood by his side, their expressions mirroring the same resolve. This moment, the culmination of their transformation from exiles to a formidable force, would define their future. Kessler knew that if they failed now, everything they had built could crumble. But if they succeeded, the possibilities were endless. "We're not the same people who first landed here," Kessler said, his voice steady and powerful. "We've survived Glaber's harsh conditions, adapted to its dangers, and uncovered its secrets. But this moment is about more than survival. It's about showing the galaxy who we've become. We will not cower. We will stand tall, united. Lyra's voice interrupted his thoughts, her tone more cautious than Kessler's. Kessler, remember that we don't know what the ship's occupants want. They've shown us a gesture of peace, but that doesn't mean they don't have their own agenda. Kessler nodded. I know, Lyra. But we won't let fear dictate our actions. We've come too far for that. With the decision made, the exiles began preparations for the meeting. Kessler's strategy was clear: they would not show weakness, but neither would they provoke unnecessary conflict. The goal was to communicate, to learn about the visitors, and to test the waters for possible cooperation. The ship had warned them that others were watching, and Kessler could not ignore the potential dangers lurking beyond their immediate horizon. Still, he believed that unity, strength, and diplomacy would be their greatest assets. As they assembled in the central courtyard of their settlement, the exiles prepared to send a direct message to the ship in orbit. A large array of communication equipment had been set up, with Lyra overseeing the final checks. The technology they had developed with the help of the mineral was sophisticated, allowing them to send and receive messages with an unprecedented level of clarity and precision. The ship had made its intentions known: they wanted to learn, to observe, but what were they truly after? The ship's presence had already been a source of wonder and unease. To the exiles, it was a symbol of the galaxy's vastness, something they had long been cut off from. They had survived Glaber, yes, but the galaxy was a different beast entirely. Kessler wondered if they were ready for what lay beyond their small corner of the universe. Finally, a crackling sound filled the air as Lyra activated the communication device. The exiles stood in tense silence, their collective breath held as the first transmission was sent. The moment seemed to stretch on forever before the ship responded. This time, the communication was different, clearer, more direct. A voice, calm and measured, echoed from the speakers. Exiles of Glaber, we have received your message. We come in peace, but we are not alone. You have made a significant impression on us. Your survival, your adaptation to this world, and your potential have not gone unnoticed. We seek knowledge. We seek to understand you, and we offer you the opportunity to learn from us. The voice paused, as if weighing its next words carefully. But know this: there are others who may not see your rise in such a favorable light. Power, no matter how hard-earned, often attracts those who seek to control it. Be wary. Kessler's mind raced. These were no idle words. The warning rang clear: there were others, more powerful, watching them closely. But there was also opportunity in the offer to learn. He glanced at Lyra, who was studying the communication screens with intensity. We're being offered a chance, Kessler said, his voice firm. But it comes with a risk. They've given us a choice: peace or conflict. We have to decide what we want. Lyra's eyes met his, filled with both caution and curiosity. We need to know more. We can't afford to make a mistake. Before Kessler could respond, Rook spoke up, his voice sharp. We've waited long enough. If we're going to face the galaxy, we need allies, not enemies. I suggest we accept their invitation, at least, for now. Kessler nodded. He trusted Rook's judgment. The former military strategist had helped shape their defense plans and had been a key figure in their survival. It was clear that Rook believed the ship's occupants could be valuable allies, at least in the short term. We'll respond positively, Kessler decided. But we'll also be cautious. This is a new world for us, one where the rules are different. We need to make sure we don't lose ourselves in the process. The response was sent, and within moments, the ship's occupants responded with coordinates, a location not far from the exiles' settlement. They were inviting the exiles to meet them face to face, to speak in person, and to see what the visitors had to offer. The exiles prepared to leave the safety of their settlement for the first time since their arrival on Glaber. They would travel under the cover of darkness, guided by the coordinates they had been given. But there was still an air of uncertainty. What would they find? Would the ship's occupants be as peaceful as they claimed, or was this all a ploy? Kessler stood before his people once more, his mind made up. This is our chance. We have the strength to protect ourselves, but we also have the intelligence to learn. We will approach this meeting with an open mind. Our future depends on it. The exiles moved out, their hearts full of anticipation and fear. As they trekked toward the meeting site, the stars above seemed to watch over them, as if they too were waiting for what would unfold. The fate of the exiles on Glaber, and perhaps their place in the greater galaxy, hung in the balance. The choice. The journey toward the coordinates was both nerve-wracking and exhilarating for the exiles. They traveled by foot and vehicle, traversing the rugged landscape of Glaber beneath a sky filled with swirling clouds and the occasional flash of lightning. The path was not an easy one, but they had become accustomed to hardship. The physical and mental fortitude they had gained from the planet's harsh conditions gave them a strength that no other species could easily match. Kessler led the group, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the coordinates pointed. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, each step a reminder of what was at stake. The future of the exiles was uncertain, and this meeting with the visitors could either open new doors or close the ones they had already fought so hard to pry open. He had no illusions about the risks they were taking. Lyra walked beside him, her expression unreadable. She had been the most cautious of the council members, always the voice of reason. But even she, Kessler could tell, was feeling the pull of the unknown. Her abilities, enhanced by the mysterious mineral, gave her an insight into the subtle dynamics of people, and she could sense the tensions that simmered beneath the surface. She turned to him as they walked. Kessler, do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake? What if they want to use us for something else? Or worse, what if they're not what they seem? Kessler's eyes locked on the path ahead, his resolve firm. We've been through so much to get here. I refuse to let fear rule us now. They said they come in peace. We have to believe them, at least for now. Lyra remained silent, but Kessler could feel her doubts. He shared them, to an extent, but his faith in their ability to adapt and thrive was stronger than any lingering uncertainty. The exiles had come this far because they had chosen to trust each other, to rely on their ingenuity and resilience. He wasn't about to let that change. As they neared the meeting site, the air grew thick with tension. The sky above had darkened, a heavy storm brewing in the distance. The exiles took cover under the overhanging rocks as they arrived at the coordinates. In the distance, a massive structure loomed, a sleek, metallic design that reflected the dim light from Glaber's failing sun. It was a ship, clearly alien, and yet it appeared strangely familiar. It reminded Kessler of the ships he had seen in the ancient human texts, the ones that spoke of space exploration and discovery. They had arrived. The group moved cautiously toward the entrance, which seemed to open of its own accord, as though welcoming them. A strange sensation rippled through Kessler's spine as they crossed the threshold, entering the belly of the vessel. The interior was nothing like anything they had encountered on Glaber. Smooth, polished surfaces and bright, sterile lighting illuminated the corridors. It was clear that whoever, or whatever, inhabited this ship had technology far beyond their own. They were led to a large chamber, where a figure awaited them. It was tall, humanoid, but its features were sharp and angular, unlike anything Kessler had seen before. The being wore a long, flowing robe that shimmered in the soft light. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural hue, and its presence seemed to fill the room. Kessler instinctively tensed, his hand going to the weapon at his side, but he quickly reminded himself of their objective, diplomacy.